much for joining us today. And can you please introduce yourself and tell us more about the social projects you're part of and the community projects that you're involved with?
Yes, my name is Wissam Charafeddine, and I'm a co-founder of the Arab American Center for Culture and Arts. I'm also a co-founder of the Institute for Religious Studies, Humanities and Dialogue, and also a co-founder of the Free Thinking Society. And I work with mostly in my Dearborn community, Dearborn Heights community, and also some of our projects, they deal with a global audience. And most of our projects are basically connecting our community with each other through what's common between us, whether it is heritage or language or culture or intellect or common needs, common interests.
So what inside of you drives you to bring people together and connect communities?
So I feel that I have benefited a lot throughout my life. I was shaped by the efforts made by others to put people together and connect people together. And I feel I owe it back to the universe and to society to do the same work. The embetterment of society will, at the end, make us more happy. Selfishness will take us to a certain extent, but then on the long run, even if selfishness made me a little bit happy, it will not make my children happy, because the society will deteriorate as it separates from each other. So working together and non-profit work, just work for the sake of society, for the sake of love, for the sake of connection, is very important for the health of society. This is how civilization is measured, is by these voluntary work, like what you're doing right now.
So what do you think unites people all over the world?
We're all humans, so at the end of the day, we are one.
How important is it to develop spiritual and moral values in our society today?
Well, that's what makes a society a society. Otherwise, it becomes a settlement of workers. It becomes a box of batteries. If we don't have values, if we don't have morals, there is no life. We basically become, pardon my expression, but animals in cages, where we are policed not to attack each other. It's definitely by the definition of society is that we come together with common values, with common needs and common interests and common passions, and we share our life together. The strong helps the weak, the knowledgeable teaches the unknowledgeable, etc.
So what can we as people and as individuals do to make sure that the best human qualities prevail in us?
So this is, when you're talking about an individual working on themselves to make these qualities prevail in us, it's really a matter of, first of all, understanding ourselves. And then when we understand ourselves, we try to set our values. And when we set our values, we understand what's our position within society. So being conscious of that, being conscious of who we are, and what is our role in society, understanding that everything that we enjoy today, everything that we have, is because of people who had that consciousness and struggled to make society better. That nothing that we're enjoying right now came for free. It is people who cared about others and who worked for others and who took their, fulfilled their duties in society and went beyond in many cases. They have delivered to us the conveniences and safety and health and well-being that we are living in today. So reflecting on oneself, understanding myself and who do I want to be in light of society. I don't live alone in a forest. I live a part of society, and how can I be a healthy part of it? And this is how, values become important. You are as much as your values are. Otherwise, we decline down to a level which doesn't lead to our happiness eventually. It leads to war and greed and basically division.
Definition, what is love in the highest sense?
Love in the highest sense is unconditional love, is love for the sake of love that's coming out of a value, when I'm not expecting an exchange for it. Love is it's very difficult to define it or understand its limits. It's a higher level of feeling, but when it's done unconditionally, then it is, I think, the highest form.
Do you think it is very important today to talk about the topics of love, moral issues, about humanity in today's society, and how important it is to have the projects which is, AllatRa International Public Movement is doing to bring out the subject in life?
So, of course, it's important to remind the humanity of what brings us together, especially in today's age, where there is a wave of neo-fascism. There is a wave of people who want to talk about what divides us. They want to talk about nationalism and borders and races and every illusion, every social construct that we have created that divides us. So in opposition to that, and these people, so many of them have power and they have a lot of media. So in opposition of that, we have to also do as much as we can to talk about what brings us together, that how we are all one, what unites us as a humanity. So it's definitely a very noble movement, and anyone who's working for such a purpose is doing a very noble and important work in today's time. This is the lack of this work at certain points in history caused world wars and caused genocides and caused whenever the people who know how we are all united are silent. This is when there is a saying that the only time you will hear the falsehood is when truth is silent.
And how do we make sure that truth is not silent and that the separation does not overwhelm the society, but unification does?
I think when you put a group of children in kindergarten and they're playing together, they don't recognize any differences between them. So I think we grow up healthy as humans. We don't have division inherent in us. It is division that's get taught and that gets handed down to children and others. So we definitely have to spread the message to protect our purity as humans, to protect our love, our one society. We lived for tens of thousands of years, according to science, as one society, until we spread out, and so it's part of who we are, and we continue today with all technology. It has turned Earth into one small village, so it is even easier to have that global citizenship recognition that we are truly a global citizens today. If I pollute the ocean, that pollution is going to some other part of the world. If I commit a crime, this crime is going to go on the internet, it's going to affect everyone. We no longer are separate in any way. We're all living, the person who's living in Indonesia is as close to you as your neighbor next door, with the technology and social media and the internet. So it is most important now, because we live a reality of living closer together. So we have to recognize how we are one.
So there's a saying that says that the news we report on today is the world we live in tomorrow. how do you believe right now media is pulling us apart, and what can we do to bring us back together?
I mean, it is obvious how media is pulling us apart. And much of it is focused on rating and views, other than ones that are propaganda and that are motivated by political agendas. They don't look at the bigger picture. They have very narrow minds, while they have the responsibility of the great responsibility of delivering news. The original purpose of news was to uncover truth. And now it is actually a form of spreading lies, unfortunately, in many cases. I think as a global citizen, we have to, the most important thing is to realize, where do you get your news from? Who to hear and who not to hear. We have to be very selective, and we have to learn the art of verification, or the science really, not the art, of verifying information and looking for sources. And we should take it so seriously who to trust when it comes to news, and also be selective, because not everything that happens you need to hear about it. We have to be selective, because this is what you hear is what affects your emotions. It affects your mood. It affects what comes out. So we have to keep putting positive until, like they say, you know, when a bottle of water, for example, has a few dots of ink, you keep pouring pure water in it until it purifies it, instead of focusing on these few dots.
Yeah. So there's many religions in our world. Unfortunately, we do not see humanity or love. In your opinion, why is that? And how come, as an example, you know, Islam is a religion of love, but we do not see love around Islam reported to the people. So what is your take on that? Why there's so many religions, but just not enough love in this world?
So it's a big topic, and your question has so many different parts to it. So first of all, as far as reporting, that's a political question, on what people report on and what they don't report on. But usually, news and history are written based on wars, not based on peace. That's what makes the news. There's a different perspective where you read about peace. It's more social history. It's more sociology. As far as Islam, and I mean all religions, we know that they advocate for love. If you ask any religious person or a person who represents his or her religion, they'll tell you that my religion advocates for love. Now sometimes the devil is in the details, you know, and again, religion is an expression of sometimes social needs, of sometimes political struggles. It's a language. It intermixes with culture. It becomes a person's identity. Sometimes religion mixes with national identity. So sometimes people, when they have political frustrations and they express their frustration violently, they use their culture or their history or their religion as a reference that legitimizes their violence. No matter what religion they are, we've seen every single religion, even some of the most peaceful religions by theory, like Buddhism. We've seen the side of it when it wants to become violent, or when people wants to use it in a violent way. So it is really a matter of language and interpretation. People will find their inspiration for violence from any religion if they need to, especially big religions that have big history. Now sometimes religions, to be also straightforward, sometimes religions provide more ammunition than other religions, and that doesn't excuse Islam from other religions. Islam also, and the Quran was revealed during 23 years of the life of the Prophet, during which 11 years were during a state where the Prophet was also a statesman, and during these 11 years there were 27 major battles, almost one every 6 months, just mathematically. So you're talking about a society that's under siege, that's under war. There were a lot of political struggle, a lot of military struggle. So it influenced the religious text. So we call, like for example in Irshad, in the Institute for Religious Studies and Humanities and Dialogue, we call for taking religious text contextually. So the verses that have to do with a time of war, they are not to represent a religion. They are well revealed for a certain context. That context does not exist anymore. So the verses that are general, that define the values, are the verses of peace, the verses of unity, the verses of humanity. And it's depicted through the non-war time, when by default the society was so open, so loving, when Muslims and Jews were living peacefully together, when they used to pass by Medina, the Prophet used to let them do their mass in the mosque. And that's the stories that are in the natural history of society. Now, when you come to the time of war and tense clashes between different cultures, that will, if religious text is produced at that time, it will be influenced by that situation, and they have to be taken contextually in all religions. And we resort back to what unites us and what brings love to us. At the end of the day, religion is a tool to bring a human closer to this universal notion of love, the universal notion at the end that God is a universal notion. So whatever in religion that doesn't do that, it means it is not for the benefit of the human.
And also in Islam, there is such a concept as nafs. And if you could explain that in the simplest terms that everybody could understand.
So nafs is in language-wise, linguistically, it means self. It's an expression, though, in Islam that represents the more animalistic self, the more self that's connected to desire and instincts and fears. And the other concept is the ruh. So ruh is put in front of the nafs. Ruh is a spirit, and it is a symbol that represents the angelic side of a human, the side that is more connected to the higher values, to the selflessness, to the connection with the divine, the connection with the universal values, the connection with love and service of others. And these two concepts are embedded in the Quran and in the Islamic text.
Okay, very interesting. The self-work of Islam is related to nafs, correct?
Right. So the what's called the great struggle, al-Jihad al-Akbar. The great struggle is for a person to elevate himself or herself from a nafs, from the desiring and fearful self, to the ruh, to the value-filled self and love-filled self and the universal self.
So we had a conference and it was called Society the Last Chance. And we have actually talked about the topic of Islam, and we have talked about jihad and how it's misrepresented in current society. And we were talking about what it really means in Islam versus what the society wants us to think it means. How do you explain jihad in self-work?
Yeah, so I mean, jihad, the concept of jihad, which is the struggle in Islam, it is clearly defined by a tradition, by the Prophet saying to people who came back from a battle that welcome to the people who have come from the small jihad, and they have the bigger jihad left. And when they asked him, what is the bigger jihad or the greater jihad? And he said it is the struggle against the self, the nafs, which means the elevation of the self against the desires that are, because not all desires are negative, but the desires that can result in an evil action or in a selfish action.
So how can we as people move from the consumer society to a creative and a constructive society?
Yeah, well, this is a big question too. It's not something that I can answer by myself, but I can give you my personal thoughts.
Yeah.
So my personal thoughts on it. So the basis, the roots of us being a consumer society is due to having so much unfulfilled areas in our heart and in our emotions and in ourself. We try to fill these areas of void with consumerism, with materialism. And there is a wave of realization that these are not bringing happiness, that materialistic societies and consumer societies have not brought more happiness to humanity. And there is a wave of minimalism, as you know, that is more trendy among younger generation, which is in opposition to consumer society. And you wonder, all these advertisement and media establishment, and still there is a natural wave of anti-consumerism that is coming up. This is how much there is need and there is repulsion from the consumerist society that we have experienced in the last after the information age or the information revolution. So it's really finding to deal with something. You have to look at the root. You know, there is something missing in the depth of society and the heart of society. This lack of sincere connections, the lack of love, the lack of you see it with all these dating apps, with all these. You know, there was a service of renting a family during a Christmas. How sad is this? That someone has to rent a family to celebrate Christmas with. This is how divided our society has become. We have separated our senior citizens from our community. We built separate communities for them. We don't gather except for, you know, we are overworked. And we are driven by the need and the want for these merchandise and these materialistic things. But I think there is a wave that is going to keep growing, that is realizing that happiness is not in these. No. And I'm optimistic about the future.
Right. And the best things in life you cannot buy, right?
Right.